Now that you've found UBN Radio and discovered our quality talk shows, it's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's ubnradio.com.
Welcome to Both Sides Now, featuring the unconventional duo, Dr. Shirley and medium Kelly White. Two perspectives, one world. This is Both Sides Now.
Welcome to Both Sides Now. I'm Dr. Shirley.
I'm medium Kelly White.
And as usual, we have John, our producer, here tonight.
In a different studio in the back.
In a different studio, and he doesn't have a microphone, so we won't be able to hear you. But
Yeah.
I will say those bits of, those pearls of wisdom that you always throw out at us.
I'll yell them this time.
Okay, good, good. So tonight we're going to get started right away because there are no kind of
there's no
planet things going on
not
or
anything
noteworthy.
noteworthy.
No Mercury retrograde.
No,
We're back to
just regular stuff.
Okay, good.
Although people have been complaining all week that this has been a really anxiety-producing week. I think it's the debates, but
Yeah, well, the energy
is a little off.
Still kind of off. And tonight, we're not going to take any calls because we have a very special guest, and we wanted to give him as much time to give us the wonderful information he's going to give us. But next week, we will take calls again.
Yes.
So tonight, we have Dr. Raja Selvam, and I'm going to read his bio because I want to make sure that I get it right. He's a senior trainer in the Peter Levine Somatic Experiencing Professional Trainings, which I had him in 2011 as my trainer for the last year. And that's where we met the first time. He's the developer of Integral Somatic Psychology. It's an advanced training for experienced clinicians with the goal of improving clinical outcomes through greater embodiment of all aspects of experience and all levels of the psyche and the physical body. So we will have him explain that a little bit more, maybe in English,
yes.
because
Yes.
he teaches in as many as 20 countries: Asia, Europe, North and South Americas, and the Middle East. And John, you will put his website on, or the Integral Somatic Psychology.com. So welcome, Raja.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are so happy to have you. John? What happened with the audience applause?
Oh, we'll get to it. I have a lot of things going on.
Busy? Okay. We usually have a wonderful applause
Yes, there you go.
of the people that we can't see. There we go. So anyways, thank you for joining us. I know that you don't live here, and it's a treat to have you here when you're in town. And what we're going to talk about tonight, and what you're going to bring to us, is something really, really important, I think, and it's what science teaches us about how to manage our emotions through the body. Yeah. So why don't you tell us first, kind of where we're at, where kind of the psychiatry and the medical world is at with how maybe still the Western world deals with emotions and how we think we can help people with emotions still.
Okay. The field of psychiatry is focused on the role of emotions in the brain. That's what they are looking at. Mm-hmm. They tend to follow the school that emotions are generated in the brain, and when they are troublesome, then the brain has to be regulated somehow. And they usually recommend medication to do that. Mm-hmm. For example, if you have depression, they recommend one of the antidepressants. Yeah. Now, it works. It works. There is no doubt that the brain is involved in the production of emotions. The brain is involved in the production of every experience. There is no doubt. The debate is about whether emotions also generated elsewhere in the physiology. Mm-hmm. If you look at the human physiology, brain is just one part of the human physiology.
Right.
It has a special role, definitely. And but then there is a vast physiology outside of the brain that is also involved in the production of emotions. Now, this is not a popular view. However, anyone who starts to notice where they feel anxiety in the body during the debate last night, they quickly can sense that it's happening all over the body. It's not only happening in the brain.
Right. Yeah,
fact-
I felt something in my tummy.
Exactly.
Tightness.
Exactly. Some people throw up,
Yeah.
So some people shake. And if you gather a group of people, 100 people, and you poll them on where did you feel the anxiety last night, or the satisfaction from your candidate performing well, which is also an emotion.
Yes.
Emotions are not just sadness, happiness, guilt, fear, anger, etc. It's more. There is any number of possible emotions if you start to notice the body. Emptiness when somebody is not at home with you, and fullness when they're with you is an emotion.
Yes.
Now these emotions, poets know about, country singers know about, musicians know about it, great novelists know about it. But however, in psychology, the focus has been more on exploring the primary, what they call the primary emotions. What do you feel? Anger, sadness, da 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 da. So, but in order to feel a wide range of emotions, one has to sense the body. But for the moment, let me put that aside. Let me just take any of the primary emotions. Anxiety is a form of fear. And it's a type of fear, right? Dread is a type of fear. And alarm is another type of fear. Lack of safety is another kind of fear. Now, these emotions, variations, they're also generated in the body. And this is another school. Not in the body psychotherapy tradition, which, by the way, tends to be on the fringe of psychology. This is scientific fact. In fact, the first theory of emotions from over 100 years ago, the great psychologist and one of the great psychologists of the U.S., William James. You've heard of him.
Yes.
He studied everything from emotion to altered states, spiritual states. He's like Carl Jung, and he and another Scandinavian psychologist, his name was Carl Lange, Carl Lang. They came up with a hypothesis that emotions are generated first in the body. The brain perceives something, and then it evaluates it, perhaps, but then it puts the body into certain states, makes the heart beat faster, that makes the muscles tight, and secretes something from the adrenal glands, the endocrine, the muscular, and the muscular system, the endocrine system, and the autonomic nervous system. And those sensations that are, jumbled sensations that are generated are then sensed by the brain and made conscious as an emotion. That is what is called the James-Lange hypothesis. However, immediately, there was a psychologist, neurologist, his name is Walter Cannon, who, by the way, is also the originator of the threat response model we use in somatic experiencing. Orienting, fight, flight, freeze, dissociation. That started way back then. So he's a great neurologist, but he wanted to prove his teacher, William James, wrong. That's how you get fame in the field. And essentially he cut the vagus nerve supply from the gut to the face, to the brain, and then scared the mice and showed that they exhibited fear behavior, facial behavior and actual behavior. And he said, there, you don't need body to generate emotions. So that in that debate, to this day, the brain is dominant. There are more people who believe it's all about the brain, it's all generated in the brain, and if there is anything that is sensed in the body, it's only the person's attempt to cope with the emotion. So they would say, you're sensing sadness in the chest, that is your body preparing to do something about the sadness. It is not sadness itself. Does it make sense? It doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't. It doesn't meet face validity of people who can sense their body below the neck. So there's a whole stream there. We have Antonio Damasio, who teaches at the University of Southern California, and my alma mater, by the way. I taught there. It's not my alma mater. I used to teach there. But he belongs to the school. It's generated in the body. So if I have somebody come and stand next to me whom I don't like, for example, when Trump stood very next to Hillary, if she had felt what she felt, she would have felt at the level of every cell in the body aversion.
Yeah.
Right? Or Trump says he feels the strong attraction, so that is felt in every cell of the body, right? So that is the way in which we start to generate emotions at the cellular level. Then we have all these other systems that are involved, like the muscles, etc. For example, if I do this and say I feel confident, you do not believe it, I don't feel it.
Right.
Or if I do this and say I'm confident, or if I do this and say I don't feel confident, you don't believe it, I cannot feel it either. So it's simple, easy to demonstrate. The body is involved in the generation of emotions as well. Now, the question then is asked: what about the brain? We have a lot of research that the brain also generates emotions through dopamine and serotonin, etc. Now, so the answer should be, in a polarized country, then of course it's either this or that. But anybody looking at it from the outside would say, why not just believe that it can be generated in both places?
Yeah, I don't understand that one or the other.
I know.
Both are involved.
That's how the academic debate goes on. But if people don't sense the body, they don't value the body, they think it's something that medicine treats or the gyms treat through exercise, they're not aware of the body. This is something that we could talk about perhaps later on. The role of emotions on the body and psychosomatic or psychophysiologic disease.
Yes.
I was at a conference in New York, and this association of psychosomatic or psychophysiologic disorders is staffed by medical practitioners who are looking for psychological reasons to cure the vast number of people who come in with all these diseases that they can't quite treat them medically. Right. So that's something that we can look at.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can talk about because we're doing a part 2.
Yeah, but let me just wrap this up, and you might have questions. So emotions, Damasio's view, for example, says it can be generated in the brain, it can be generated in the body, it can be generated in either place, stored in the brain and recalled without involving the rest of the brain and the body. These are the complexities of emotional generation. Now, what happens, let's say we get anxious, and unpleasant emotions are always generated by dysregulating the body to a greater or lesser extent. Otherwise, why would we pay attention to it? I have a heartbreak, my body is feeling great. Why would you pay attention to your heartbreak? No?
Why would you care? Yeah.
Right. You want to break up and you want to go and your heart cannot bear it. You come back and say, please take me back. Now, if you could walk away without your heart feeling anything unpleasant, it's just a little feeling in the brain, then why would you care?
Yeah.
Right? So unpleasant emotions are created. This is scientific research by Damasio, Antonio Damasio, and Candace Pert. You've heard of?
No.
Candace Pert has written a wonderful book called Molecules of Emotions, and her she's the one who first discovered the opiate receptor. And she didn't get the Nobel Prize. Her mentor got it, and she felt very betrayed. And that's another story, a topical story of the times about what happens to women in science.
Yeah.
And so what she discovered, in the 1980s, it became possible to study cellular happenings through nanotechnology. The whole field of psychoneuroimmunology developed. So they could sense cells in the body. They could see cells in the body creating stuff, like hormones and steroids and peptides, cells in the body generating similar stuff. And they could travel, from the body to the brain or from the brain to the body and create all kinds of experiences, not just emotions, behavioral impulses, cognitions, and so on. So she said, you cannot say that the mind is in the brain all exclusively, because if it is being generated, something is generating in the gut and affecting your cognition, you can't say, you can only have to say body mind. You've heard the term body mind.
Yes.
And she was a bit ahead of the time. You know what else she found? This is interesting. You might be interested because you work with energy, She said sometimes it starts in the brain and spreads to the body. Sometimes it starts in the body, spreads to the brain. Sometimes it starts in both places at the same time, which means that's happening somewhere in the body we can't measure yet, or it also looks like it's coming from the outside. Yes, and which is consistent with Eastern psychology's view that all experiences start in your subtle body.
Yeah.
What is now being called the quantum body, a body that exists,
Yes.
and that can generate all kinds of experiences, right? And that the life of which might not be finite, things like that. But that's going off,
So, but how would you define the subtle body?
Subtle body is a quantum level body. Like if you think about it, if I take my nail and let's say I break it down and I come to some iron molecule and I keep breaking it down, I'm going to go to fermions and quarks and so on. You've heard of all these terms. Now they keep discovering, they smash atoms and keep discovering
Oh.
tinier and tinier things till they cannot, they send protons at the speed close to the speed of light through superconducting super colliders to smash them against barriers or against each other, and on a computer observe a blip, then we have identified the boson. It's an energy particle.
Wow.
So in the East, the terminology of energy body and physical body is not used. What they use there, they call it the gross body and the subtle body, because this body of mine that goes into the coffin also exists like a brick on a higher molecular compositions, right? Whereas the subtle body exists only at the level of quantum level phenomena, which you cannot observe. Some people are able to, but scientifically through instrumentation. But it has a significant influence on the body, on the physical body. But I think that's getting away from it.
Yeah.
That's a whole other topic.
But so that's what you would call the soul.
Soul,
Yeah,
exactly.
So and at some point, are you talking about the aura too in the subtle body?
Aura will be there's so many concepts, no?
Right.
So many models. So an aura would be seen as a manifestation of the subtle body.
Okay.
I mean, that's the way to understand
Because
it.
so often with me, when I work with my clients, they may tell me one thing and I'm looking at something else. They may tell me they're not depressed, and yet I'm looking at a real gray, dark aura there. It's very clear for me to see. I have a really good vision of that.
Right. So you're gifted. You have the ability to, observe these things, and very sometimes you find that energy work, is very effective, and there are all kinds of studies now, scientific studies, with the help of quantum physics that establishes these things. Yeah. So.
So getting back to the conversation of emotions and the body.
Yeah.
So what would you tell for people listening?
Yeah.
How can they help themselves when they have maybe an overwhelming emotions,
Exactly.
which we're not used to? Nobody really teaches us how to work with emotions,
Exactly.
particularly
Yeah.
from a body standpoint.
Exactly. So we start with the idea that the emotion can be experienced throughout the physiology of the organism, in the brain and the body. So we don't put brain first, body second. But because there's a lot more real estate in the body than in the brain,
Right. That's very true.
it can be used.
Yeah.
And how do you use it? So if you think of it as an energy, if you think of something and if it's unbearable, let's say I have anxiety from watching, the debate. I can barely breathe. But there is something in us, the brain, because it's more oriented primarily to survival, does not tolerate the demand made by the limbic brain to generate unpleasant states to create unpleasant emotions. So Freud knew this. We are all pain avoidant and pleasure seeking.
Okay, so that's what you mean, that for the most
the
part we
innate.
avoid pain.
Yeah, innate, unless we are masochistic, right?
Right.
But we avoid unpleasant. The brain avoids unpleasant experiences.
Yeah.
It's an innate resistance that you and I share. For example, when I make up in the middle of the night, every night, if I'm anxious, I don't say, let me look at this anxiety. Let me see whether I can elaborate it and study it. I immediately check my email. It's a distraction, right?
Right.
So true.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, or when I'm so tired in the evening, I'm tired and depressed, I keep watching binge watching a show. It gives me a little bit of pleasure, but I notice that I'm becoming really tired. I can, if I were to lie down and tolerate that tiredness a little bit, then I can fall asleep. If I can embrace it, it expands. And when it expands in the body, it becomes less intolerable in every part of the body. So if you think of grief, for example, I'll give you an example. No? When we were working in India among tsunami survivors, a boy came to us and took his hand and, put a therapist's hand on his heart. And he said, tsunami, he didn't know English, thump, thump, thump. And, he shook. He just, so what do I do? Now, every time he has the tsunami rumor that happens to him. So we taught him, well, it is fear. It's natural that you're afraid because you nearly died, your family nearly died, but it's just fear. So let us see what we can do. Yeah? What can you do? So what you do is that you just notice that it's fear, put your hand on the chest. That will support the chest from constricting to fight the fear and expand the fear, not to get rid of it. You don't tell them, put your hand there to soothe your fear, then they will soothe it away. But you say, put your hand on your chest and allow it to breathe into it and pay attention to how it expands, the fear expands. So you keep supporting it. And then see, maybe move your hand a little bit. This is what we taught him. And notice what happens, because what people tend to do when they feel anxious, they tighten the neck, they tighten the shoulder. It's as though they're trying to squeeze it down into the sinkhole of the heart, to get rid of it. That's what we do. That's what we all do. So into the sinkhole of that's what anxiety attacks. That's what that's a whole other thing. But if you allow it into the sinkhole, that's what a whole other thing. Yeah? Maybe it would spread to the belly. Maybe it will spread to the legs. Because I've seen fear, sometimes I feel it all over my body.
Yeah.
And when I'm able to do that, it doesn't tax any part of the body as much as it would if it were concentrated in one area. And you work with energy, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
If energy is stimulating it, if it's not balanced, I'll talk about it in terms of the heart chakra a little later on. But just at the scientific, physical level, it expands. The person finds it more tolerable. Just at the brain says it's okay. The heart is not going to go into arrhythmia. It's okay. It's okay to be with this. Then you can stay with it longer. And when you stay with it longer, you know what happens? Sometimes you don't know what you're afraid of. Like you're afraid of Trump, you're afraid of Hillary. People, I think half the country is afraid of one, half the country is afraid of the other. But when the people have excessive reactions, it's something about their past. It's not really about the present, right? And how do you know that? Only when you're able to expand it, have a lot of information, sit with it. Then you know what? The right meaning comes. And there's a wonderful woman named Paula Needenthal, who's at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She runs an emotions laboratory, and you might want to have her on the show.
Okay.
And she did a simple experiment. You know what she did? She said, I'm going to show you something emotional. To half the people, she said, bite on a pen. The other half of the people, she said, just watch. The people who bit on the pen, they locked their facial muscles from participating in the experience of the emotion. So later on, and she, you have to measure the brain nowadays to publish anything. So, and later on, she also asked them about it. The people who did not bite on the pen, who could allow, therefore, for the emotion to come from the brain into the face, they not only the limbic circuits lit up more, the association circuits lit up more. And later on, a week later, they were able to recall what it was about and what the emotion was. Then the people who were biting on the pen all the time, they couldn't remember the emotion, they couldn't recall it, and they couldn't remember what it was about. So my argument is, in fact, I wrote to her and said, Paula, I think it's a very wonderful experiment. Why don't we extend it to the whole body? I'll teach you how to extend it to the whole body. I've not heard from her. That's because people don't want to go below the neck in academia. But it's my experience all the time that when I get people to accept that it's important for them to feel,
Right.
necessary suffering is important to grow, for spiritually or psychologically. Unnecessary suffering you have when you avoid the necessary suffering of life. No?
Yeah.
And this is also true of pleasure. People, feel pleasure in limited places, because when I constrict my body against pain, I also get into the habit of constricting the body against any intense emotion. So if I have pleasure, love, etc., I don't feel it in my legs, which is such a waste of pleasure. Then I'm
It's so true.
on the run for something else, some other exercise to bring pleasure. When you have a lot already, you can use the same technology to, through movement or through breath or through self-touch. This is something that I want to write about. And I was thinking, I need to write a self-help book, about
And
it,
how
really.
to do this. Now, do you think that people don't let that happen because initially it feels overwhelming?
Yeah.
And so what you're teaching is that feel it,
Yeah.
and maybe if you're feeling it too much in the chest, move your arms and have the energy move so it
Exactly.
expands, or your legs.
And look for the feeling. Support the
Yeah.
feeling to expand. One reason is innate resistance. Nobody wants to feel unpleasant emotions. I'm first,
Right.
right? But there is also something called psychological resistance.
Yes.
That has to do with whether you were told whether you could be vulnerable at home. Or some cultures are told not to feel certain feelings.
Right.
So there's also a block that is psychological, cultural. And that one has to educate oneself about.
Like boys don't cry and that
Boys
kind of
don't
thing.
cry and,
Right. So what would you do? How would you teach our listeners about depression? You talked about anxiety. If you feel it too much, you do this and you move your arms. Does it depend on just where you're feeling it?
Yeah, you would start, different people are going to feel it in different places.
Yes.
And what's the best predictor of that? Your family.
Oh.
Because
how so?
we learn, a lot of the learning is nonverbal. We now have studies that show that, there are many measurable energies along the electromagnetic spectrum. There's a man named James Oshman who has written a book called The Scientific Basis of Energy Medicine. And he's not talking about subtle body energy. He's talking about measurable energies like gamma rays, electromagnetic waves and so on. He sees he can measure, these energies being exchanged, and we gather information all the time, that this is how we intuit. When we sit with the clients, we suddenly feel sad. It doesn't have to go through the mirror neurons and the visual field. Now, does it happen that way? Of course it happens that way. We have scientific proof. But it also happens, brain to brain, electromagnetic messaging. This we can, there's studies that show that.
Yeah.
And so anything somebody else's experience can be telecast. If your cell phone can pick up my cell phone 1,000 miles away, there's no reason why we cannot pick up information. Now, we might not be able to make sense of it. So we say it's intuition, right? It's intuition, right? Or, but it's commonplace. So,
So you were saying about how little kids, how your family teaches you.
family. So we
where to-
learn that, like I work in Germany a lot. We know an attachment, for example, the research is what? As grandmother, mother, granddaughter, right? We know that. This is also true. War trauma of the grandmother becomes the war trauma of the mother, becomes the war trauma of the granddaughter, even though both the daughter and the granddaughter were born much after the war. Because the grandmother is emanating it. People at school are emanating it.
Yeah.
So you're affected all the time. We are affected by energies all the time. And we try to, in psychology, make a nice story about this encapsulated individual who's, hit by discrete events that shapes our lives.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So this is a fantasy, right? And it's more freeing to actually open this up. So going back to Candace Bird, can be felt everywhere. So why don't we use the container of the whole body And that's where I've had a lot of success. And this knowledge has been there in science. No? It's not in mainstream psychology, but also not in body-oriented psychotherapies. In body-oriented psychotherapies, people are looking at where is emotion stored. They were looking at it. But more often, how is the body blocking emotions? But they were not into what? Really into how is the body generating these things. Only in the more recent body psychotherapy system called body dynamic somatic developmental psychology out of Denmark do you have a systematic mapping of the psychological functions, the emotional functions of each muscle in the body. Right? That's done empirical research. But we don't have to be that complicated, right? We can teach people, expand the emotion, accept it, but don't just stay within one place. I know people who have followed the strategy of just stay with until it transforms, you know, the standard.
Right.
That doesn't work if it's one place and you keep paying attention to it. It can actually end up dysregulating that part of the body. I've run into that a lot. So I would, to answer your question, allow it to expand. Just say, you can be your own scientist. Your body is your laboratory. Next time you watch the debate, third debate, I invite you to, without getting into the mind and getting into rageful reaction, allow the anxiety to really spread throughout the body. And with the idea of tolerating it, and you might get somewhere.
So that could be anxiety, that could be anger.
It could be anything.
Any emotion.
It could be any emotion.
And so for people who aren't really connected with their body and wouldn't even know what to even begin to feel or notice.
Yeah. Before I answer that question, I want to go back about, I remember your question about depression. Depression is a shutdown, no?
Yes.
It can come from, sometimes it is an affect. For example, depression is a loss of hope.
Yes.
Loss of motivation to live. The organism is, life force is what? Flailing. It's limp. It can be viewed that way.
Yes.
Then you can sit with it. You can expand that experience. But more often than not, depression is a defense against what? Some other emotion. It can be loneliness. It can be failure. It can be anything. So what I would do is to have the person think about what situation are they in their lives. And if they cannot, get a book, self-help book, or written by somebody who has gone through some experience like that. Read about what emotions they went through. And then you track that emotion in your body. And of course, emotions need support. Go to therapy. You don't have to go to therapy. Go to a self-help group. There are any number of 12-step programs here where you can sit and share your experience. You hear other people sharing their experiences. Codependence Anonymous and, Alcoholics Anonymous. It depends on, where you feel attracted to. So it can happen in such a setting, right? You don't have to necessarily go to therapy, but therapists are people who are trained to detect what stage of affect development you might be missing in your growing up. So some people can cannot even generate any emotions.
Right.
Some people generate them, they don't know what it is, right? They constantly eat, but they don't realize that the craving is really loneliness that wants companionship.
Right.
And some people cannot express them, right? Some people cannot act on them. Right? They might have to go on Match.com or something like that. They need behavioral support. So depending on what level of affect development they lack growing up, then a psychotherapist is the right person who's trained to, diagnose where you lack and provide you the support to grow into a more mature emotional person. And but the question that you're starting to ask me that again.
Well, so what tools can you help our listeners when they're so disconnected from the body? I mean, I see some people that I can almost see the head come and the body is following because they are so disconnected.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
So what tools can you give people to even begin to connect with their body so they can begin to start to feel and allow their emotions to expand?
So to first become a scientist, just form a hypothesis that the emotions could be in the body.
Right. The possibility of
emotions in the body. Ask other people where they feel it.
Okay. That's a great idea.
Right? And then you notice your body. Notice your body. And if you don't feel your body, move your body. Because when you move your body a little bit, you don't go for a walk, move your body, right? The tendency to do is to become still and not breathe in the face of emotional difficulty is very common.
Yes.
That's a defense. So everybody does it. It's a coping mechanism. We all need to be able to do that. So, and then notice the body. What the body is feeling. Either the body is feeling what, good or bad. That people can identify, right? So I can say, I don't feel good sitting here. Oh, I actually started to feel better after I sat down with you. That is an emotional statement, because very often people are thinking. Somebody asks, what do you feel emotionally? They're thinking I had to come up with a sophisticated emotion like sadness, right? Or fear. I might not feel those things. In fact, most of the time, we are never without an emotional response. Even when we're thinking, either the thought is favorable or not favorable.
Right.
Even when I'm trying to solve a problem, I'm even having a difficult time, I'm excited about it. Right? I have an emotion, right?
Yeah.
And so you're never without an emotion. You're without an emotion only when you're without a body, right?
Right.
But then people are floating outside the body and they have cognitions, emotions, everything.
They have everything.
So they have it. So even you have to get rid of that body.
That's true.
Yeah. So you start that way. It feels good to be with this person. Doesn't feel good to be with this person. That level of generality people can come up with, and that is that is what sometimes psychoanalysts call sensory motor emotions. But then they don't work with it as much because they don't tend to work with the body, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they can create a lot of emotions in the brain, sophisticated emotions with metaphor, but then the body remains uninvolved. So teaching people that, in fact, that will be a good way to start to counter the prevalence of running to the medicine cabinet every time you're not feeling good in the belly.
Right.
Can you do that with grief?
Yeah, grief is
I have a lot of people that come in, who have lost loved ones from suicide, and they're so grieving so much that they don't want to live themselves.
Yeah.
And so, what would be a good way for anybody out there listening to get them to move, to get that vital life force up again, so they'd want to live?
Now, some people have not cried.
Yes.
They're not in touch with the grief. So you have to start to say, are you sad? Do you have grief? Tell me a movie you saw in which you found a lot of grief. Sometimes it's projected outside.
Yeah.
So to the extent to which they cannot generate it, the psychotherapist or the friend brings their experience and the experience of so many other people to validate, to mirror, to support that grief to come in, right? But once you have it, you cannot tolerate it. And I'll give you an example of a mother who lost 3 or 4 children in the tsunami.
Oh my gosh.
And the irony of it is that only the child that survived is her least favorite. Right?
Ooh.
And when we saw her, we went 6 months after the tsunami. I tend to go into post-disaster settings later when all the first responders have left. They're wonderful people. They do great work in terms of first aid, but that's not, and there's so many people, there's so much funding for it. We normally go 1 year later or 6 months later. That's what we did in Sri Lanka, 3 years after the war ended.
Wow.
And I'm going to be doing a workshop in Brussels for trauma victims of the recent terrorist attacks. But then we have refugees pouring into Europe.
Yeah.
There are many people working with them. So I'm going to do a workshop. Then I said, I'm not here to do first responder. And it's not people. Most people heal by themselves in the communities they live in, right? And that is true of PTSD, no? Only
the more connected the community.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But the average is 10% of the women and 5% of the men develop PTSD, right?
Yeah.
And it might be double, but it's still a small number. People heal, you know.
Right.
And so if you wait, people haven't healed, then why have they not healed? It's because they cannot digest the experience. Let's take the experience of grief. No? I'll give you a couple of examples. With this woman,
So the woman, yeah.
she's crying and getting exhausted. Right? Now, grief is turning into, she's like a fountain. So crying, she has headaches, right? She can't sleep. So we said, of course, how do you heal a wound like that? Your soul will be imprinted with it. It's something that you have to live with. However, can we make it a little more bearable?
Yeah.
So that you can sleep a little better, work a little better. You have another son to care for. So how do you do that? Then we said, it's like an energy, no? So feel the grief in the chest. And she cries because she's been crying for 6-7 months, no? So we say, hold those tears back. We don't want to in any way, invalidate your grief. It's a grief that we will never understand. Only a mother will understand. But where is it in the body? It's censored in the heart. Where else would it be? Where else is it? Put your hand there. And she starts to cry, and then we comfort her. And this way, and then move your arms so that the energy can move into the arms, right? And the block at the shoulder, etc. The body tends to constrict, right, and break up. So we try to, movement can help to undo it. That's why dance therapy and movement therapy are quite effective. And if done in conjunction with psychological work, then you start to feel it, no? You sit with it, and you might get to a place. When do we know that something is behind us? When we can feel it and tolerate it and have a sense that we can live through this.
Yeah.
That's when a completion takes place. Otherwise, we tend to what? Block the head, block everything, right? And this becomes some problem. People have blood pressure symptoms, arrhythmia or asthma, all these things we have worked with. And in India, the doctors are saying, we don't know what to do with them. They come back, we have tried to do everything we can. So we just tell them it's stress. And it is, definitely. Because if you have an emotional experience that's not resolved, it keeps coming up, it's going to create more stress. And that's how psychophysiologic symptoms form.
Right.
Really.
Right. So what you're saying is that it's not that the sadness ever goes away, but it can become tolerable.
Yeah, at first it becomes tolerable.
Yeah.
Then I know deeper sources of it, my might, right? I might know what to do about it. These are studies, no? Damasio has written a book called Descartes' Error. People who have more emotion over a longer period of time, they know what to do about it better than people who don't have emotion. So the whole idea that rationality versus emotion is a complete idiocy. It proved scientifically in the book Descartes' Error. So it's not only you come to know what it's about, you also come to know what to do about it much more effectively. So, and if you can generate it in as much of the body as possible, then you can tolerate it. That means you can sit with it. Then you have so much more information that your brain can analyze, come to right conclusions about what it is and what to do about it. Otherwise, loneliness can become an eating disorder. Yeah. If you cannot tolerate it and just run to the refrigerator all the time.
Well, and that's what, I get so angry with a lot of still the drug treatment programs, where they just deal with the symptom, but they don't deal with what's underneath the symptom. So, of course, then someone stops maybe drinking, but then they start eating, or they get into another drug or something. Exactly. It infuriates me.
Exactly. And also they also sometimes make it a genetic problem. Now, I don't want to say that there are no genetics involved,
right?
But to say it's all genetic, it's all nature, then again, across the board, it might be for some people.
Right.
We have to allow for the possibility. There's proof. But across the board, if it is that, then how do you change?
Right.
So.
Right. Well, that's the study, I think, of epigenetics, where it's the environment can either leave a gene dormant or stimulate it.
Exactly. Bruce Lipton, in his wonderful book, The Biology of Belief, talks about how in every cell there are filaments, that vibrate, which actually receive these energies from the electromagnetic spectrum. So, in some way, the environment can determine the gender of the child in the womb.
Wow,
Right.
that's interesting.
Exactly. So this is the and the belief. If you think about the belief, what is belief but energy?
That's very true.
If you look at it,
Yeah.
what is a thought? What is a word but energy? Right? So it can have an effect. We can put, the Emoto's work you've seen, right? In
The what?
Japan, Emoto, Amoto, Emoto.
With the water? No.
Yeah, with the water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
So
fascinating.
putting a label on a bottle of water changes whether it's love or hate. The crystalline structure changes completely. Now, I've always wondered whether the person who's putting the label on the bottle of water knew what the word was. That would be interesting to study.
Yeah.
Is it the consciousness of the researcher, or is it just the
Just the energy of the word.
energy of the word? And there are theories that support both in the East.
Oh, that's so interesting. Wow.
Because a mantra, they say, Gayatri mantra, is effective if you know the meaning or not. Om is effective whether you know the meaning or not.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting
Right.
study, no?
Yeah.
So.
So that's 3 minutes. My God.
Wow.
Time flew. I am so engrossed with this because, so many people try and get away from emotions or, when you're not taught how to feel them. For the longest time, I prided myself on not having any because I shut them down and with the somatic training, I started to get in touch with my emotions, but it's almost like learning a new language,
Yeah.
to get in touch with them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not only the dreams start to come, because when you start to get in touch with the body, the differences in the body are strong, and it's easier to shut the brain down in some ways than the body, right? When the body is shut down, it's a powerful defense. This is what early body psychotherapists learned, and they would just get people to breathe and move, and all these emotions would pour out of them, no?
Yeah.
Scaring everybody, right? So when you work with the body is not just a source of emotions; it's a source of behavioral impulses. It's a source of cognition. For example, in biodynamic somatic developmental psychology, the lower leg muscles have been empirically found to have the function of balance between thinking and feeling about a situation. So if you tighten those muscles, it's very difficult to have feelings about them. Whereas when you open them, more feelings come into the chest. Yeah. Interestingly, in polarity therapy, the lower leg muscles, if they're not open, the heart chakra energy does not circulate through the body. It creates too much of a stimulation in this chest area, making an emotion like grief unnecessarily more unbearable. Or it goes up to the brain to stimulate the brain. So you talk about it, and that's typical talk therapy, no?
Right.
If they go below the neck at all, it's in the chest, not below the diaphragm. This is, and then there are all kinds of gastrointestinal problems that they're treating with doctors, when in fact, the kidneys and the large intestines have a lot to do with the circulation of the heart chakra energy. This is polarity therapy.
Oh, that makes so much
That's
sense.
another level of embodiment altogether.
Wow.
Just the physical body is first, because that's our most primary body. No?
Right. Well, this is fascinating. We're going to keep the conversation and actually air it another time because this is too fascinating and too interesting. It's so important to begin to allow yourself to feel the emotions and, as you're saying, expand them so you can better tolerate them, because emotions are a part of being human.
Different types of emotions. Just feeling not good or good about a person is an emotion. You have to start there.
Right. It's so, we either learn how to do it or we don't. And if we don't, we may get sick, we may get diseases, as you're talking about, because emotions are there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The long-term studies that show children who learn how to have emotions and deal with them do much better in life, not only personally but professionally.
Wow.
Wow.
So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It was such a pleasure. The time just flew by.
It sure did. So, and there's our audience again. So thank you for watching tonight, and tune in. We will post on our Facebook page and Twitter page when we are going to air part 2 with Dr. Raja. Let me pronounce your last name correctly. Selvam. Yes.
Perfect.
Would you like to say any?
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. That was just great. And for our viewers, next week we'll be taking live calls, call-ins,
Yes.
with questions about your loved ones or loss of your loved ones.
Yes. So join us next week, and thank you for watching.
I will be tuning in too.
Okay. Thank you.
You've been listening to Both Sides Now, featuring the unconventional duo Dr. Shirley and Kelly White. Two perspectives, one world.